Greetings. Assalamu alaikum. This is your brother, like no other, Elder Black Light. Islam is my claim to fame. Omar Kareem Nasser Muhammad, I'm shortening it up some, is my righteous name. Sorry for not being on schedule. I just got to get more organized. But you'll catch the video. Elder Blacklight is my handle. And I'm lighting my little candle for the whole world to see. You can do you, and I can do me. I just want to be free. I got the flavor that can save you and the kind of knowledge you won't get in college. From the land of Nod to the kingdom of God. Rise and shine. It's prime time for nation time. We're about ready to claim rulership and separate from this corrupt world. I'm titling, the name of this video will be entitled, You Better Listen. Piloftricks in the pulpit. War Words 2 coming at you. The truth should be told and not sold. A good name is worth more than gold. So it's more than righteous to have the name of the Creator, your Father. You got 99 attributes. The 100th attribute is Allah. Certainly you must be a part of His DNA. So therefore, a good father will give you His name. I'm Black Light, spreading the truth, passing the mic. Unity is the key. Organized, righteous unity is the key. The only thing that can make us free. You see the good brother Nipsey Hussle. We're going to talk about him and his ties to Africa, Ethiopia. Where the Garden of Eden we're going to show that connection in a minute. A pile of tricks in the pulpit. That's a play on politics. Instead of saying politics, we saying a pile of tricks. In case y'all don't get it. In the pulpit. Of course, we referring to Lion Biden. And we're not excluding Trump with the funk. Bringing the funk like a skunk all in the air. No, I'm not excluding them. I'm telling you to come out of her. Don't vote for anyone but the Most High, the Creator, Allah. We're going to go where Trump is at this church, where this, not too long ago, a white devil came and shot up 10 people. So he going to go to their church. But they're going to disrupt his flow. And we're going to show you how the mass media, some of them did better than others, how they covered it. Talking about the war of words, right? I'm holding up in my hands a book written by a sister named Drusilla Dungy Houston. And the title of this book is called The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. See the pyramids in the back. Ethiopia goes back further than Kemet. You have you after Ethiopia, you got Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Then you got the Arabian Peninsula. It also stretches to India. It also stretches to China and Japan. The whole world was called Asia. You had Asia Minor and Asia Major. Asia Minor and Asia Major. We're going to talk about that. We also want to talk about stocks and bonds. Where it goes, where it's talking about the black man in slavery. That's where stocks and bonds came from, the stock market and all like that. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to go back to Moses in Egypt and the Jews lying. You know, we're going to go to the scriptures to show you where they're lying. A little bit about the 10 Commandments more. We're going to get a little bit more into that. And then we got some more we're going to show you. But let's get started. Yeah, let's get started. We're going to get started in a minute.
Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the live goals here, you should honor the live goals to call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
That was footage from a speech President Biden gave at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina yesterday. The historically Black church and site of Dylan Roof's racist 2015 massacre served as a staging ground for the president to try to rally voters in the state ahead of the 2024 election. Now, MSNBC host and former Biden aide Simone Sanders lashed out at protesters at the church, saying Mother Emanuel AME is hallowed ground in the AME church community. In Charleston, especially, the shock of people in the crowd at protesters yelling out while President Biden was speaking from the pulpit cannot be overstated. I, too, couldn't believe it. The president's poll numbers continue to stay stagnant. A new AP poll suggests that many Democratic voters would be unsatisfied if Biden were nominated as the Democratic candidate for president, while more independent voters would be dissatisfied if Biden were nominated than Trump.
Well, the polling hits keep coming. Future Majority reports Trump is up 6 points in crucial swing state Pennsylvania, while Rasmussen reports shows large swaths of voters, nearly 2/3 of voters, see the crisis at the southern border as an invasion, a critical failure point for Biden as immigration continues to rank very highly as an important issue for voters. Here to discuss Biden's reelection chances and polling data is host of the Savvy Saps podcast, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome back, Sabrina.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
Always great to see you. First, why don't you address this dust up at the church and the complaints from some people like Simone Sanders that this was inappropriate given the setting?
The nerve of Joe Biden to appear at a Black church after he has reneged on the promises that he made to the Black community when he ran for president in 2020. He has some gall. This goes to show you, if you look at the protesters that were in the audience of that church, those were younger voters. It shows you that once again, Joe Biden has not found a way to connect with young voters in this country. Most of the people in that audience are older voters, which is what you would expect if you go to a lot of the Black churches, predominantly in the South. But we can't be mistaken. Jim Clyburn is sitting there right next to Joe Biden, almost as a sidekick, so to speak. And Jim Clyburn bears the responsibility of some of this as well, because he was the one that told his constituents to support Joe Biden in 2020 because Joe Biden was going to deliver for the African-American community. I actually graduated from the University of South Carolina, but I didn't grow up in South Carolina. So I never really understood the admiration for someone like Jim Clyburn. People would say to me, it's because he hosts a fish fry. You can fry your own fish. This just goes to show you how little we are willing to settle for in the Black community. We need to start asking these leaders, some of the Black leaders, what are they doing for the community today? And Jim Clyburn is not doing much for the community today. His district is one of the poorest districts in the country. Meanwhile, Jim is living just fine. So I think people like him have led us down this path. They've had us continue on the same path that we've been doing for the past couple decades, which is why we haven't received any type of progress when it comes to politics in this country. Now, in reference to Simone Sanders, we have to remember Simone Sanders was Joe Biden's senior advisor when he was running for president for 2020. She was hoping that she would get that press secretary gig. That didn't pan out for her. He gave that to Jen Psaki instead. And it almost seems like they gave her an MSNBC position kind of to just quiet her for so much of a bit. But this is Simone Sanders' job. She is still supposed to carry weight for the Democratic Party, to carry weight for Joe Biden, to defend him at all costs. And when she makes this statement that she's more concerned about the protesters that confronted Joe Biden, I'm more concerned about genocide, Simone. I'm more concerned about our tax dollars being spent to fund these wars abroad. I'm more concerned about the fact that the Democratic Party till this day refuses to give any type of real concessions to the African American community. Those are the things that Simone Sanders should be upset about, but she's not. She's trying to make sure she holds her spot at MSNBC.
I think you make a number of really important points there, both about Clyburn's influence in the district. Remember that a significant majority of South Carolina voters in 2020, so they voted for Joe Biden precisely because of Jim Clyburn's endorsement, as opposed to anything particular about Joe Biden. He really is a kingmaker in the state. He also, as you pointed out, has one of the poorest districts in the country, and perhaps unrelatedly in terms of his political affiliations, has taken more money from the pharmaceutical industry than any other member of Congress. Now, as back to the Simone Sanders tweet and the backlash, you did see a lot of people making exactly that point in response to her tweet, saying, what about the genocide? You're talking about hollow ground in a church when people are protesting Israel's bombing of the third oldest church in the entire world that is in Gaza, and the treatment of so many Palestinian Christians who have died in the birthplace of Christianity. Christmas, obviously, we remember, was canceled this year, and the birthplace of Jesus. And of course, a former Christian Congress member, two family members were killed pretty early on in this conflict. I want to ask you about the kind of racial dynamics of this as they played out in the wake of this controversy. One of the initial accusations was that these were white protesters that were disrupting a black space. And there was a clear kind of identity politics pivot that was made by the Democratic Party to say these are pesky white protesters that show no respect for the black community, and trying to pit the black community, which has shown so much solidarity for the Palestinian cause, against the Palestinian community, both in the United States of America and in the diaspora. What do you make of that choice? And what is the truth of what was happening there in the church?
A year after a heart attack, Mike's feeling like himself again. But even though time has passed, his risk of a second attack hasn't. Mike is still living in the red, with a very high risk of another heart attack or stroke. He doesn't know with his risk factors, his LDL-C, bad cholesterol, is still too high. The recommended level is below 55. Are you living in the red? Get in the know. Learn how to get a free LDL-C test at whatismyldl.com.
There was also, if you look at the woman standing next to
Sugar is sugar, salt is salt. If they throw in a commercial, it ain't my fault. I'm just gonna let it roll, y'all.
The white woman there was a black person there too as well. But the thing is that you should be disrupting these spaces whenever these politicians are present. This is where Joe Biden chose to be present at that point in time, regardless if it's a black church, regardless if it's a school, regardless if it's a fundraiser that these politicians are attending. You should disrupt all spaces in effort to cease fire in reference to a genocide. I can't even believe people are using this type of excuse when they're sitting up here carrying weight for a president of the United States who co-wrote the crime bill. Like, this is just absolutely ridiculous. Now he's complicit in a genocide. Anything to protect the status quo, anything to protect the Democratic Party, which is a corporate organization. We have to push back against the status quo in this country. And I don't know what it's going to take at this point. I do know that Jim Clyburn, for example, did have a challenger. I believe Marcel is running against Jim Clyburn again. Like, I don't know what more it's going to take for people to really wake up and understand that the status quo is leading us to a dead zone in this country. And if we want some type of real concessions for the black community, we're going to have to push some of these former black leaders to the side, and we need new leadership. That's what it's really going to take. But I think that's an excuse that they tried to use. Of course, they tried to play this card. How dare they even show up in that space in the first place? Well, Joe Biden is in that space, and Joe Biden is an African American. That's not really what it's about. Wow. They just didn't like the fact that they interrupted the idea of the protest.
Are you sure he's not African American? Because I have a hard time imagining that a white presidential candidate would turn to the black community and say, "You ain't black if you don't support me." I'm joking. Yeah. Of course, we should just also mention, I don't know that we know actually the race of this woman in the middle. She very may well be Palestinian. And we also should note, because we didn't do it so up top, and we cut the clip off a little bit early, The Free Palestine cheers and advocates were drowned out by the rest of the crowd chanting 4 more years. And some folks thought that was a really interesting demonstration of the priorities of the Democratic Party that calls for peace and a ceasefire would be responded to with a political cry. I also just wanted to read one tweet from journalist Terrell Jermaine Starr, who I think represented some interesting pushback here. He said, if you invite politics into the pulpit by inviting a presidential candidate to speak at a church, you welcome debate in the pews. Do you think there's something to that you open the door to this kind of a political response if you turn a church, a house of worship, into a pulpit for a political exercise?
That's right. I mean, everyone that attends this event isn't necessarily supposed to agree with Joe Biden and praise and applaud Joe Biden. We're supposed to have free speech in this country, right? So we're supposed to welcome those opportunities. But the thing is that when we look at people, again, like the puppet sitting next to him, Jim Clyburn, he has these churches in his back pocket. This is why so many people, he was able to convince them to come out and support Joe Biden instead of Bernie Sanders, because Jim Clyburn has Black churches on speed dial. He's able to win over that congregation, and that's all it takes. And people have to understand that a lot of this, when we talk about politics and how people choose to vote in reference to the Black community, a lot of it starts with the Black church. So that is where you have to go to make some type of change. If Jim Clyburn was serious about progress in this country, all he would have to do was say, listen, guys, this has not been working. We've been supporting the Democratic Party. It is time for us to move outside of this vehicle. And it is time for us to honestly push towards some type of third party or independent race, because they actually haven't been helping the African-American community. They would follow him, Bree. They would.
No, that's not the right rhetoric or the right words. The words is to separate and get a nation of our own. Do for self. There's enough. We got enough money. The black sons and daughters of slaves. It's over. I know it's over 20 million. That's what it was when Elijah Muhammad was starting the Nation of Islam. It's got to be over 20 million now. So can you imagine how much money that if we keep it circulating in our community at least 10 times, what we can generate from that? I might add that Joe Biden and Al Sharpton are bosom buddies. There's a lot of Black preachers in the hip pocket or the pockets of the deep.
Go where he will go. That's the thing. So Jim Clyburn, people like him, they are holding us back, and that's a big problem.
Savvy Sabs, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we're going to go next door. Knock, knock.
President Biden is also on the trail today in South Carolina, where he spoke at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, which, of course, is the site of the racist massacre in 2015 that killed 9 parishioners. His speech was meant to focus on extremism, and it drew heavily on the same themes and talking points from his Friday speech on threats to democracy, including attacking his likely opponent, the former President Donald Trump, and his hard-right followers.
They don't have respect for the 81 million people who voted the other way. Voted for my candidacy. In their world, these Americans, including you, don't count. But that's not the real world. That's not democracy. That's not America. In America, we all count. And losers are taught to concede when they lose. And he's a loser.
Senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is with the president in South Carolina. He joins me now. So, Gabe, today's speech comes off his big appeal on threats to democracy last week. Why does the White House think that this is the best message to kick off 2024?
Well, hey there, Ryan. The Biden campaign feels that this is the issue heading into 2024, this existential threat to democracy, which President Biden has been talking about now for several months. You mentioned that speech on Friday. That was the first campaign stop of this year. But several months ago, he was talking about threats to democracy over in Arizona at the McCain Institute. This is a message that the Biden campaign, at least, feels will resonate with voters because it is so important. Certainly other issues important too, but they feel that this is the main issue heading into 2024. There is a lot of questions, though, about whether, Ryan, black voters here in South Carolina, whether they think it is the main issue. And over the last day or so, we've been speaking with voters here in Charleston, and they have concerns about the Biden administration, and they feel that there have been some broken promises. They have wanted the president to do more on things like student debt relief and prescription drug coverage. Take a listen to what some of them told me.
I feel like my generation, my peers, we were promised that student loans would be erased, and that hasn't happened. I think that police reform is also important to us, and also voting rights.
Well, this idea that the Democratic Party has kind of pandered to black people and, promising them all these things, and then they get in office and it kind of feels like they're forgotten. I think that's kind of like the sentiment that a lot of people have, and I think that's one of the reasons now where people, especially young people, care more about, who the right person for the job is versus like what's the right party.
Now, Ryan, of course, the White House did take action on student loans. It was the Supreme Court that ruled that the Biden administration had overstepped, and yet still the White House says that it has wiped out some student loans for some Americans. But that's the question, Ryan. Despite the Biden administration taking action on some of these issues, will voters give him credit for it? Fine.
Yeah. And of course, we saw during the speech kind of the real world issues that Joe Biden is dealing with as president of the United States and the impact it could have on his candidacy, as there were protesters that attempted to interrupt his speech, calling for a ceasefire. Does this highlight the challenge for Biden this time around as he tries to recreate that successful 2020 coalition? Are the divisions in his party deeper than they were 4 years ago?
It certainly appears that way, and you're right. That incident did highlight those deep divisions within the party. There were several protesters, at least 2 of them shouting in the middle of his speech. At least 5 protesters were escorted out. Now, I should point out that he was in front of a very friendly crowd here at Mother Emanuel Church. They drowned out the protesters by saying 4 more years, and he received standing ovations when he came into the church. But certainly, Ryan, in addition to the concerns about whether the Biden administration is doing enough for black.
Now, those are old black people down south. They just don't understand, y'all. They are deaf, dumb, and blind and ignorant. They ignore the truth. They don't want to see the real truth. A couple of them got shot up 10 years ago. They just don't want to see. Deaf, dumb, and blind. What would it take to open their eyes?
Voters, the coalition you mentioned, the Biden campaign, going to have to try to win over some of these progressives who are unhappy with how his administration has been dealing with the Israel-Hamas war, Ryan.
Yeah, and it may not be that they vote for Donald Trump, but that they just stay home, which would be just as big a problem for Joe Biden. All right, Gabe Gutierrez, live from Charleston, South Carolina. Thank you, Gabe, for that report.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
So now we're going to go down the street, a couple of doors down, knock on their door, and see what they got to show.
Without the truth, there's no light. Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the light goals here, you should honor the light goals and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Now, I see a whole lot of white people in that audience as well. Go one right there, one next to him, you know, right here, right there, right there, all over there. There's a lot of white people there too. Wonder where they come from.
Thank you. Look, folks, I understand their passion, and I've been quietly working with the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza. I'm using all that I can to do.
He ain't withdrawing the troops and those aircraft carriers. The United States got some aircraft carriers over there. He ain't withdrawing them. He over there helping them fight.
But I understand the passion. Look, folks, after the civil... Thank you. Look.
I gotta hit her again. That sister crazy. Deaf, dumb, and blind, and out our mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
But she's sitting next to that white guy. That's why she's saying that.
After the Civil War,
you getting ready to trip now. I'm gotta play that one more time.
But I understand the passion. Look, folks, after the Civil... Thank you.
Now look, she's sitting next to that white guy. I'm telling y'all, brothers, the white man is your mostly only competition you got. Don't forget whose face is on that $100 bill. Wait, let me go and get a bill right quick. Let's see this. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? Y'all can't deny. Y'all can't deny that the sisters love this dude right here. And this is paper. If you ain't got no paper or enough paper, you could be a working man digging a ditch. You ain't gonna get too many chicks, you know, digging no ditch, you know. And it's a dude that wear a suit every day, working in a bank or something. You get more play. And am I telling the truth? Y'all sisters know I'm telling the truth. Y'all know y'all love that white man, even though y'all might got a black man. But one thing, the brothers, you know, he ain't trying to stand up to the white man. He don't care. Let's go back.
Well, thank you. Look, after the Civil War, the defeated Confederates couldn't accept the verdict of the war. They had lost. So they say they embraced what's known as the lost cause, a self-serving lie that the Civil War is not about slavery, but about states' rights. They called that the noble cause. That was a lie that had not just a lie, but it had terrible consequences. It brought on Jim Crow. So let me be clear, for those who don't seem to know, slavery was the cause of the Civil War.
Now that man lying again. Y'all gonna believe that? Before there was a Confederate flag, Benjamin Franklin had slaves. That guy I just got through showing you in the picture. Washington had slaves. Before it was a Confederate flag, it was American flag. And all the presidents and the president's men had slaves, y'all. What's wrong with y'all, man? I feel sorry for you, brother.
There's no negotiation about that. Now we're living in an era of a second lost cause. Once again, there's some in this country trying to turn a loss into a lie which, if allowed to live, will once again bring terrible damage to this country. This time, the lie is about the 2020 election. The election which you made, your voices heard, and your power known. Just 2 days ago, we marked the 3rd anniversary of one of the darkest days in American history, January the 6th. The day in which insurrectionists stormed the United States Capitol, trying for the first time in American history to stop the peaceful transfer of power in the country.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We turn now to South Carolina, where President Biden delivered his second campaign speech of the year at the historic Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, where in 2015, 8 Black parishioners and their pastor were shot dead by a white supremacist. Biden remembered the victims.
On June 17, 2015, the beautiful souls, 5 survivors, invited a stranger into this church to pray with them. The word of God was pierced by bullets of hate, of rage, propelled by not just gunpowder, but by a poison that's for too long haunted this nation. What is that poison? White supremacy. Oh, it is a poison throughout our history. It's ripped this nation apart. It says no place in America. Not today, tomorrow, or ever.
That's all right. As he spoke, Biden was disrupted by activists demanding a Gaza ceasefire.
Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the lives lost here, you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire!
As the protesters were removed from the church, supporters of President Biden began chanting 4 more years. He addressed the protesters.
I understand their passion, and I've been quietly working with the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza, and using all that I can to do.
Without naming Donald Trump, Biden blasted the former president and leading 2024 Republican candidate as a loser who tried to overthrow the 2020 election results by urging his supporters to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. A number carried Confederate flags and wore white supremacist and far-right symbols. Following the massacre at the Emmanuel AME Church in 2015, following the mass funeral at the University of Charleston Arena that thousands came out for, our next guest, Bree Newsom Bass, scaled the 30-foot flagpole at the South Carolina State Capitol and removed the Confederate flag. As police officers shouted at her to come down, she shimmied to the top of the flagpole, took the flag in her hand and said, "You come against me with hatred, I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today."
You come against me with hatred and oppression and violence. I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today.
While Bree Newsom was arrested along with an ally, it was only after this action that the Confederate flag was formally removed from the South Carolina State House grounds. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley was governor of South Carolina at the time. She has faced fresh backlash after she didn't mention slavery when asked about the cause of the U.S. Civil War during a recent town hall in New Hampshire.
You see this flag right here? Here? That flag was up before the Confederate. I ain't trying to defend them, y'all. I'm just telling the truth. That American flag with the fringes means that we occupy this country. That's a war flag. You know, a flag of war. And when they made this flag, they were slaves. I think a slave made it. You know? Y'all just got to know y'all history.
Sure. Well, for more, we're joined in Raleigh, North Carolina by Bree Newsom Bass, artist, anti-racist activist. Bree, welcome back to Democracy Now! This certainly does take us back. As people debate whether it was Nikki Haley who ultimately forced the flag to come down, we're going to the woman who actually took it down and risked your freedom to do it. Talk about why you did that then. Ultimately, the legislature would vote to take it down, and how you feel about what's happening today.
Yes, and thank you again so much for having me on. You know, I want to make it clear, yes, I did scale the pole and take the Confederate flag down. This was an issue that people had been protesting for years and years and years. And that's part of what made it so egregious in 2015 when we had the massacre at Emmanuel AME and South Carolina refused to lower the flag, because part of the reason why they were refusing to lower the flag is that they had passed a law in the year 2000 saying that it couldn't be lowered for any reason after they moved it from the Capitol Dome to the flagpole on the lawn where it was at the time that I took it down. So this had been going on for years and years and years. And Nikki Haley actually opposed taking the flag down right up until those massacres occurred and the mounting political protest and the pressure made it where she basically had to, at that point, support the flag coming down. So ideologically, she has never really had this stance of being opposed to either the Confederacy or, symbols of the Confederacy, and certainly not opposed to racist policy. She went right from the governorship to serving in the Trump administration. And she's had a number of incidents over the years where the things that she says or the things that she does directly contradict with her, her claim of having led the way on taking the Confederate flag down. At one of her recent rallies, she played that song, find out in a small town, you know, that the song that people really raised a lot of concern about because it was obviously alluding to sundown towns and the racial violence that Black people have experienced here for decades and decades and decades. So this is not new for Nikki Haley. It just shows that she does not really represent anti-racism in any real way.
And Bree, I'd like to ask you, in response to President Biden's speech, you posted on social media a quote, how the Black church is used as a prop for white politicians actually proves the point that racism is alive and well and strong. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that the whole way that the incidents in 2015, both the massacre at Emanuel AME, the refocus on the Confederate flag there in South Carolina, the formal ceremony around taking the flag down, and the way that American politics returns to those moments again and again and again speaks to how relevant it still is. The fact that Black churches are frequently used as, political campaign stops for politicians. In this case with Joe Biden, he is clearly trying to make an appeal, not just to Black voters, but really trying to fend off criticism that he is racist, that he is sponsoring a genocide. And that criticism is completely well-founded because he is sponsoring a genocide. And genocide is the most extreme form of racial violence that there is. And so to use the pulpit at Emanuel AME in this manner, to make it a prop essentially for Joe Biden's re-election bid, to me is the greatest assault on truth. I know Joe Biden stood there in the pulpit and said that there is an assault on truth that's happening right now. Joe Biden is in many ways leading that assault. And I know that he's running against Donald Trump, who we know is also a serial liar, but Donald Trump is not the one who is currently in office right now. It is Joe Biden. And this effort to use the church.
But Trump said that he's with Joe Biden with the war over in Gaza. We yet can't see that this democratic society is not for us. The Democrat society is not for us. It's for whites only. We, like the Globetrotters, bounce the ball around in basketball. We the ball. Biden is the home team. Trump is the challenger. And they bounce the ball around. We the ball. They see who's gonna get the most in the hoops. And whoever put the Black people in the hoops the most wins the whole thing. When y'all gonna wake up?
It's not just the Black church, but the site of racial violence, of a mass murder, to deflect from the fact that Joe Biden himself is bombing churches, bombing mosques, bombing places of worship, and murdering many civilians, people who have sought shelter in those places. It just exposes the complete hypocrisy of this entire situation and the vacuum of moral leadership at the top. And that's why I took offense to it. I think that's why many people who watched it took offense to it. I'm very glad that the young people stood up and protested, because even though they were few in that audience, they represented the majority of people worldwide.
It's interesting, Bree. The polls that have just come out today indicate that Nikki Haley is surging in the polls in New Hampshire. You referenced where she stood on the Confederate flag. I wanted to go back to 2014, when then South Carolina Republican Governor Nikki Haley suggested South Carolina had resolved its image problem and that having the Confederate flag at the State House was fine because not a single CEO had complained. She was speaking at a gubernatorial debate.
You know, the Confederate flag is a very sensitive issue. And what I can tell you is over the last 3.5 years, I spend a lot of my days on the phones with CEOs and recruiting jobs to this state. I can honestly say I have not had one conversation with a single CEO about the Confederate flag. What is important here is that we look at the fact that, yes, perception of South Carolina matters. That's why we have everybody answering the phones. It's a great day in South Carolina. That's why we're being named the friendliest state and the most patriotic state and getting all these great accolades. But we really kind of fixed all that when you elected the first Indian American female governor, when we appointed the first African American U.S. senator.
That was Nikki Haley back in 2014. Bree Newsom-Bass, your final comment.
I mean, I think that says it all, right? So first of all, she's saying that it's okay. The optics are okay, right? We're not talking about the substance. We're not talking about the experience. We're not talking about whether people are actually experiencing equal treatment under the law, just the optics. So the optics are fine because it's not disrupting business, right? And then the other thing that she offers as evidence that everything is okay is the fact that she's non-white. She is an Indian American woman, and then she points to other people in the administration, excuse me, who are non-white. Well, that's the entire problem right there. The idea is that so long as we can keep business going as usual, it doesn't matter that there's violence. It doesn't matter that there's racism. All that matters is the optics. And that is what Nikki Haley's campaign represents in her falsely claiming that she led the way on taking the Confederate flag down. That's what Joe Biden's campaign represents in terms of thinking that all that matters is giving a speech at a church and ignoring all of the churches that are being blown up and all of the Palestinians that are being killed, ignore the fact that young people are demanding a future and we have people who are older who don't seem to care at all that this assault in Palestine is...
I'm 77 and I'm on the front line, baby girl.
Disproportionately affecting children or killing children. And then in the case of Nikki Haley, again, she does not truly represent any of the things that she is claiming when it comes to being anti-racist. You can say whatever words you want to say. You can put together whatever kind of events you want to put together. But the fact is that the truth is going to be the truth. We see what is actually happening. And I support all of the disruptions because the last thing that we need is to carry on business as usual when our democracy is absolutely under attack. Democracy is under attack worldwide. And genocide is the most extreme form of racial violence that there is. So there's no way that we are fighting white supremacy simply by taking down a flag or having an event at Emmanuel A&E in the midst of genocide, in the midst of doing away with affirmative action, voting rights, the attack on abortion rights. This is where we are at. It's a very dangerous place. And I hope that people look beyond the optics and support those people who are disrupting, because the last thing that we need is to carry on with business as usual.
Now that word democracy, y'all, don't mean what y'all think it means. You know, I told y'all the meaning of it in my last video. So anyway, let us continue. And long as you keep on trying to blend in with the white man's system, which he don't even call it democracy. He don't call this system a democracy. He called it a republic. That's what he called it. A constitutional republic. And he don't even follow the Constitution. Y'all gotta start learning. Y'all gotta start including myself, we got to start researching, studying. That's why I should be a hood research in every hood. A team of researchers in the hood, in your house. Look up. I showed y'all yesterday, they got books. You can't see that. Can you see that? Word origin. The dictionary of word origin. The origin of words. You ain't got to even try to get a book like the origin of words. The word democracy is defined in the regular college dictionary. That's why I'm calling it the war of words. Y'all got to know what words are. They trick you with words.
This is Audible. You are about to hear The Willie Lynch Letter and the Making of a Slave, read by Ronald Eastwood. Contents. Chapter 1, Greetings. Chapter 2, Let's Make a Slave. Chapter 3, Cardinal Principles for Making a Negro. Chapter 4, The Breaking Process of the African Woman. Chapter 5, The Negro Marriage Unit. Chapter 6, Controlled Language. This speech was delivered by Willie Lynch on the bank of the James River in the colony of Virginia in 1712. Lynch was a British slave owner in the West Indies. He was invited to the colony of Virginia in 1712 to teach his methods to slave owners there. The term lynching is derived from his name. Greetings. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I should thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still have the oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human beings along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasions. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you're having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problem. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if you installed it correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take them differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about it. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's Make a Slave by the Black Arcade Liberation Library. It was the interest and business of slaveholders to study human nature, and the slave nature in particular, with a view to practical results. I and many of them attained astonishing proficiency in this direction. They had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men and by every regard they had for their own safety and prosperity, they needed to know the material on which they were to work. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do. Were they the victims of such wrongs? They were constantly looking for the first signs of the dreaded retribution. They watched, therefore, with skilled and practiced eyes, and learned to read with great accuracy the state of mind and heart of the slave through his sable face. Unusual sobriety, apparent abstractions, sullenness, and indifference, indeed any mood out of the common, was afforded ground for suspicion and inquiry. Frederick Douglass. Let's Make a Slave is a study of the scientific process of man-breaking and slave-making. It describes the rationale and results of the Anglo-Saxons' ideas and methods of ensuring the master-slave relationship, the origin and development of a social being called the Negro. Let us make a slave. What do we need? First of all, we need a black nigger man, a pregnant nigger woman, and her baby nigger boy. Second, we will use the same basic principle that we use in breaking a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors. What we do with horses is that we break them from one form of life to another. That is, we reduce them from their natural state in nature. Whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take care of their offspring, we break that natural string of independence from them, and thereby create a dependency status, so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. Cardinal principles for making a Negro. For fear that our future generations may not understand the principles of breaking both of the beasts together, the nigger and the horse, we understand that short-range planning economics results in periodic economic chaos, so that to avoid turmoil in the economy, it requires us to have breadth and depth in long-range comprehensive planning, articulating both skill-sharp perceptions. We lay down the following principles for long-range comprehensive economic planning. 1. Both horse and niggers is no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. 2. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. 3. For orderly future, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the youngest offspring. 4. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and a division of labor. 5. Both must be taught to respond to you in a peculiar new language. 6. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. We hold the 6 cardinal principles as truth to be self-evident, based upon the following discourse concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down about. Accordingly, both a wild horse and a wild or natural nigger are dangerous, even if captured, for they will have the tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest. They sleep while you are awake, and are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house, and it requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in this natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken. That is, breaking them from one form of mental life to another. Keep the body and take the mind. In other words, break the will to resist. Now, the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and thoughts on the female and the offspring of the horse and the nigger. A brief discourse in offspring development will shed light on the key to sound economic principles. Pay little attention to the generation of original breaking, but concentrate on future generations. Therefore, if you break the female mother, she will break the offspring in its early years of development, And when the offspring is old enough to work, she will deliver it up to you, for her normal female protective tendencies will have been lost in the original breaking process. For example, take the case of the wild stud horse, a female horse, and an already infant horse, and compare the breaking process with two captured nigger males in their natural state, a pregnant nigger woman and her infant offspring. Take the stud horse, break him for limited containment. Completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in her comfort. Breed the mare and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse where she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand also. When it comes to breaking the uncivilized nigger, use the same process, but vary the degree and step up the pressure, so as to do a complete reversal of the mind. Take the meanest and most reckless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female and the nigger infant. Tar and feather him. Tie each leg to a different horse faced in an opposite direction, set him on fire, and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining nigger. The next step is to take a bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger male to the point of death in front of the female and the infant. Don't kill him, but put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding. The breaking process of the African woman. Take the female and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desires willingly. Test her in every way, because she is the most important factor for good economics. If she shows any signs of resistance in submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract the last bit of bitch out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so you spoil good economics. When in complete submission, she will train her offsprings in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age. Understanding is the best thing. Therefore, we shall go deeper into this area of the subject matter concerning what we have produced here in this breaking process of the female nigger. We have reversed the relationship in her natural uncivilized state. She would have a strong dependency on the uncivilized nigger male, and she would have a limited protective tendency toward her independent male offspring, and would raise male offsprings to be dependent like her. Nature had provided for this type of balance. We reversed nature by burning and pulling a civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen, independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reversed roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offspring to be psychologically independent. What have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger man behind and scared. This is a perfect situation of sound sleep and economics. Before the breaking process, we had to be alertly on guard at all times. Now we can sleep soundly, for out of frozen fear, his woman stands guard for us. He cannot get past her early slave molding process. He is a good tool, now ready to be tied to the horse at a tender age. By the time a nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken in and ready for a long life of sound and efficient work and the reproduction of a unit of good labor force. Continually, through the breaking of uncivilized savage niggers, by throwing the nigger female savage into a frozen psychological state of independence, by killing of the protective male image, and by creating a submissive dependent mind of the nigger male slave, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the male and female slaves. We showed what we mean by example. Take the case of the two economic slave units and examine them closely. The Negro marriage unit. We breed two nigger males with two nigger females. Then we take the nigger male away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one nigger female bears a nigger female and the other bears a nigger male. Both nigger females, being without influence of the nigger male image, frozen with an independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. The one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. We negotiate with her, through her, by her, and negotiate her at will. The one with the nigger male offspring, she being frozen subconscious fear for her life, will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. In other words, body over mind. Now, in a few years, when these two offspring become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle. That is good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. Warning: possible interloping negatives. Earlier, we talked about the non-economic good of the horse and the nigger in the wild and natural state. We talked out the principle of breaking and tying them together for orderly production. Furthermore, we talked about paying particular attention to the female savage and her offspring for orderly future planning. Then, more recently, we stated that by reversing the positions of the male and female savages, we created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever unless a phenomenon occurred and reshifted the positions of the male and female savages. Our experts warned us about the possibility of this phenomenon occurring, for they say the mind has a strong drive to correct and recorrect itself over a period of time. If I can touch some substantial original historical base, they advised us that the best way to deal with the phenomenon is to shave off the brute's mental history and create a multiplicity of phenomena of illusions, so that each illusion will twirl in its own orbit, something similar to floating balls in a vacuum. This creation of multiplicity of phenomena of illusions entails the principle of crossbreeding the nigger and the horse, as we stated above, the purpose of which is to create a diversified division of labor, thereby creating different levels of labor and different values of illusion at each connecting level of labor. The results of which is the severance of the points of original beginnings for each sphere of illusion. Since we feel that the subject matter may get more complicated as we proceed in laying down our economic plan concerning the purpose, reason, and effect of crossbreeding horses and niggers, we shall lay down the following definition terms for future generations. Orbiting cycle means a thing turning in a given path. Axis means upon which or around which a body turns. Phenomenon means something beyond ordinary conception and inspires awe and wonder. Multiplicity means a great number. Sheer means a globe. Crossbreeding a horse means taking a horse and breeding it with an ass, and you get a dumb, backward ass, long-headed mule that is neither reproductive nor productive by itself. Crossbreeding niggers means taking so many drops of good white blood and putting them into as many nigger women as possible, varying the drops by the various tones that you want, and then letting them breed with each other until another circle of color appears as you desire. What this means is this: put the niggers and the horse in a breeding pot, mix some asses and some good white blood, and what do you get? You get a multiplicity of colors of ass-backward, unusual niggers, running, tied to a backward-ass, long-headed mule, the one productive of itself, the other sterile. The one constant, the other dying. We keep the nigger constant, for we may replace the mules for another tool. Both mule and nigger tied to each other, neither knowing where the other came from, and neither productive for itself, nor without each other. Controlled language. Crossbreeding completed, For further severance from their original beginning, we must completely annihilate the mother tongue of both the new nigger and the new mule, and institute a new language that involves the new life's work of both. You know, language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of that society. Therefore, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to that extent is the country vulnerable to attack or invasion of a foreign culture. For example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is then no more a slave, for you can't fool him any longer. And being a fool is one of the basic ingredients of an incident to the maintenance of the slavery system. For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out our crops, and he knows the language well, he would know that our crops didn't mean our crops, and the slavery system would break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really meant. So you have to be careful in setting up the new language, for the slaves would soon be in your house, talking to you man to man, and that is death to our economic system. In addition, the definitions of words or terms are only a minute part of the process. Values are created and transported by communication through the body of the language. A total society has many interconnected value systems. All the values in the society have bridges of language to connect them for orderly working in the society. But for those language bridges, these many value systems would sharply clash and cause internal strife or civil war, the degree of the conflict being determined by the magnitude of the issues or relative opposing strength in whatever form. For example, if you put a slave in a hog pen and train him to live there and incorporate in him to value it as a way of life completely, the biggest problem you would have out of him is that he would worry you about provisions to keep the hog pen clean, or take the same hog pen and make a slip and incorporate something into his language where he comes to value a house more than he does his hog pen. Now you've got a problem. He will soon be in your house. This has been The Willie Lynch Letter and the Making of a Slave. Copyright 2013 by Snowball Publishing.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.
This is Black Light, Elder Black Light, and you're in the Soul School, the God Zone, y'all. take a pause for the calls. I'm trying to go to the next point, the video I want to show you. We found it. So I'm gonna say this to you. That's why when you come up with it as an FOI, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that we are FOI, a soldier in the nation of Islam. My duty is to unite my people, black people, and protect the women and children of my nation. I will perform my duty faithfully, regardless to who or what. My life and my death are all for Allah. And I will be loyal and obedient to the Supreme Being Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. Islam is not an Arab religion, not the ones you see over there now. It's not even a religion. It's the nature of the black man. But as you just got through seeing the Willie Lynch letter, how they broke us in to be their slaves. For 400 years, it took 400 years, and they still doing it. They still breaking us. We're still deaf, dumb, and blind to who we are. So let's go here.
If you've ever been in one of our southern states, you may have taken a sightseeing trip just as this family. A trip to see one of the plantation homes that were built before the Civil War. This beautiful mansion is one of many homesteads that were once the residences of southern planters. These homes were centers of plantation life. Inside the mansion, we can get some idea of the luxuries that a wealthy plantation family enjoyed. The home was often beautifully furnished. Planters imported fine household goods from England. These things represent part of the wealth that came from products grown on the plantation. Here is a map that explains how this plantation was organized. It was almost a little community by itself. Most of the sections of land were devoted to one crop, such as cotton. Other sections contained orchards, vegetable gardens, and pastures, the source of food for the people and the work animals. The buildings included the planters.
This is what made America. It's still a plantation, but it's in a different form. It's upgraded.
Home, a mill, workshops, and a row of small cabins for the slaves, who did almost all the work. We can still find remnants of some of these things on old plantations. These small houses were for the slaves who worked on the plantation. In this carriage house, the plantation vehicles were kept and repaired. In the blacksmith shop, such things as tools, wheel rims, and plowshares were made. And all of this was done by hand, the hand labor of the slaves. But what made each plantation depend mostly on its own labor and its own products? The answer is poor transportation. There were few roads, and many of them were in poor condition, so there was little commercial traffic between plantations. Travel was so difficult that each plantation was practically isolated, and so had to be almost self-sufficient. The easiest means of travel was by riverboat, and so many plantations were located along the rivers. At the boat landing, manufactured goods from cities could be brought in. Crops grown on the plantation could be sent out. Most plantations raised and shipped only one crop. In most plantations near the Mississippi, the one crop was cotton. Cotton was such an important part of the plantation system that it came to be called king cotton. The enormous amount of hand labor required to grow and pick the cotton was supplied by great numbers of slaves. This, then, was the economic background of the plantation. Cheap slave labor producing one main crop on vast tracts of land owned by the planter. But the plantation was more than an economic organization. It was a social organization as well. The planter and his slaves were part of an unusual class system. The sharp division of people into two main groups, the owners and the slaves, left a lasting influence on the society of the South. What was that society like? For the plantation owner and his family, it was an aristocratic kind of society. Gentle manners, courtesy, hospitality. Many of the ideas that we still associate with the people of the South came from the days when plantation life was in full flower. This, then, was the social organization of the plantation. The aristocratic class of the landowners who had wealth and privileges, and the laboring class of the slaves who had little wealth and few privileges. The plantation system in the United States reached its greatest development before the Civil War. By 1860, plantations reached from Virginia to Texas. On some of these, tobacco was produced. On others, sugar was grown. On others, cotton was the main crop. Whatever the crop, the system of producing was similar. Cheap labor, one crop, and vast tracts of land. These are some of the things we can better understand when we visit one of the old plantation homes of the past. But did this plantation life influence the modern South? Can we find anything left of the plantation system? We might find part of the answer as we look around us in the South today. Here is a scene that tells us part of the story. This plantation home was abandoned during the Civil War. Great changes in the plantation system occurred during the war. The freeing of the slaves and the great financial burden of the war disrupted the economic pattern. Some planters went bankrupt and lost possession of their plantations. But the plantation system did not entirely disappear. Some elements of that system did not change. The land, cultivated for generations and still productive, remained. The source of labor, great numbers of Negroes, remained. The demand for cotton remained, and the growing of cotton continued. So the plantation system, in a smaller and modified way, continued and can be found in the South today. much of the work is still done by hand. Much of the wealth still comes from one crop, cotton. Most of the workers are Negroes who live on the plantation. Today, the man who owns the plantation is called the landlord. The men who work the farm are tenants. And so the landlord, the laborers, and the land are still the important parts of the plantation system. Today, this owner has less land than the plantation owner of the past, and he lives in a house that is less pretentious than the great mansions of earlier times. The tenant farmers and their families live on the plantation. Each family has a small house which they rent together with a section of land. A few tenants pay their rent in money, but most tenant farmers on the plantations work their portion of land in return for a share of the crop. And so the tenant farmers, both Negro and white, provide the necessary labor for raising the cotton. What other changes have come to the plantation? The plantation today is not as isolated as it once was. Paved highways link the plantations with towns and cities. The plantation crop can be shipped by railroad or by large trucks. Today, as we look out over the southern countryside, we'll see that plantations are not as plentiful as they once were. Many have been divided up into smaller farms. On this farm, beef cattle are raised. Other farms specialize in producing milk or poultry or grain. We'll find most of these farmers using modern machinery, and we'll find that these same methods of mechanization are affecting the plantation system too. This mechanical cotton picker is one of many different machines that are replacing hand labor. Here, the most modern machines are used at every stage of the work: growing, harvesting, and preparing for the next crop. Today, that crop is not always cotton. Some plantations raise more than the traditional one crop. Soybeans, for instance, sorghum, a kind of sugarcane, and peanuts are a few of the crops that are changing the pattern of the plantation system. That system has been changing over a long period of time, but its economic and social patterns have left a lasting influence on life in the South. Today, if we visit a social gathering in the South, we'll see some of these influences: the traditional Southern hospitality, the gentle manners and courtesy, the separation of society into distinct groups, and the relationship of that society to the land which supplies its wealth. These are some of the things which the plantation system has contributed to Southern life.
They was acting like they enjoyed it was also pleasant, but at least you got a understanding of where you've been. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you are, and you definitely don't know where you're going. You know what I'm talking about, y'all. So we getting there. We getting there. We kind of winding it down, you know. But I hope that you enjoy this presentation. I'm showing you real life, you know, as it was, as it is, and as it's going to be.
John Hawkins. So the spread of Islam was stopped to allow the devils to complete their ruling after the devil had overpopulated Europe. Allah allowed them to spread out. He gave a guide to lead them. Columbus was a half original man. He guided them over, for Allah had told Moses one of his kind would guide them all the way. They realized the country would have to be built up, and they also knew they couldn't build up the country for they were not strong enough. The Queen, Elizabeth, called in leaders and world travelers and wanted to know if there existed a people on the face of the planet Earth who could stand the hard work and yet be submissive enough to submit to the task. John Hawkins told them, yes, there are, along the Nile, the strongest people and the wisest that ever lived yet. They had never been lied to. The Queen appointed John Hawkins the job of getting them into the United States. This was called the 100-Year Plan. John Hawkins one day sailed along the Nile. He came among the tribe of Shabazz. He was flying a red flag which represented freedom, and his ship was named Jesus, which means justice. He came among the tribe of Shabazz offering them peace. Our people, never being lied to or misled, accepted his greetings and him as a brother. He lived among us for 29.5 years, learning our customs, our way of life, our culture, our philosophy, our tongue, everything he could about us. After learning all he could, he started a rumor about a land to the west of milk and honey, a paradise, a place of plenty. Our people were living along the Nile. The children were allowed to play with diamonds of such size as to be astonishing. They were advanced and played with algebra as a game and pastime play. We gave out high mathematics and advanced astronomy. We were advanced in arts and mastered all the sciences of life. We were the most beautiful people physically one had ever laid eyes on, because we had mastered the sciences of proper eating and caring for the body. We could outwork any people on the planet and could endure hardship longer than anyone else. Yet we were the most devoted and the most submissive people. We were Allah's choice, his most beloved people. We were his perfect example for our brothers and sisters, a house of presents and holy ones. We were Job, Allah's most faithful servants. We were royal and holy in Allah, to whom we submitted completely was our God. We knew every inch of the planet, but when the rumor started, we fell for it. Prophecy had to be fulfilled. We went aboard John Hawkins' ship, and this was to discuss the place and get a better picture of it and better understanding. While everyone was preparing, the hatch was closed and the ship was allowed to drift into the sea. When daylight came, they were on their way. The men became aware, and some were successful in going overboard, but most were outnumbered and subdued. Question: when John Hawkins first appeared, didn't the tribe of Shabazz know who he was? Answer: yes, many knew, the same as when the devils went back to Mecca. Question: why weren't the Indians or Mexicans used for the job? Answer: they couldn't stand the labor and they couldn't submit to such treatment. After the brothers were subdued, they headed westward along the outpost that had been set up to refill on water and fuel. When the ship pulled into these islands, some of the slaves would escape, and these populated the areas and became such places as West Indies, etc. When the ship landed in Jamestown, Virginia, there were 21 aboard. After unloading, the ship pulled out and started back for another load. The 21, seeing the ship and realizing the great trickery that had been played on them, sang out, "Give us Jesus and you can have this whole wide world." Quarters were set up for the slaves, and they were treated well so they could reproduce. When the time was ripe, the devil began to separate the children from their parents. He put the children in a compound where they were raised by devil nurses. The parents were taken and worked to death or killed on the spot to embed fear in the babies. The devils would take a pregnant mother and carry her before a stake, before the father, and he would have to witness his pregnant wife being split open and the baby and her burned. This is to put fear in the very nature of the seed the father carries. The older heads were killed out, so that they would not teach the children the teachings of their foreparents, the mother's tongue, which is taught to us by our parents. As the saying goes, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Why? Because the mothers teach the children. The mothers are the ones to tell or teach the children about our great history and culture. In the compound, the children were raised by devils, and when they cried out into the night for their mothers, the sugar tits were put into their mouths. The hog fat was rubbed into the mole of their head to freeze the brain. This filthy lard seeping through the thin tissue to clog up the function of the brains. The trichinosis worms, once entering the different cavities, reproduces so fast, it soon fills up the cavity and has to penetrate the tissue and find another cavity. They protect themselves by enclosing themselves in a hard shield like enclosing. The desire would come to them, the urge to be comforted by their parents, but their parents were not to be found. They felt the burning urge to return home, but they didn't know where home was. They felt the urge to speak their original tongue, but what that was they didn't know. These feelings grew with them, but there was no one to explain these feelings to them. He knew something was drastically wrong and felt something was missing, but what he didn't know, he couldn't put his fingers on it. They, the devils, spit in the food or relieved themselves in it. They herded them like animals. They destroyed all family life among them, and for 64 years this went on 1555 to 1619. Then the process was completed. Meanwhile, they, the devil, went to southern Africa and used trichology on our brothers, turning them against each other, made them destroy their way of life, steal, kill, and rob. The devils gave them strong drinks. They brought these over in 1614. Conquered and twisted mentally, we were lost and ragged. These they brought over in 1916. The name Negro was given to them after the process because they, the devil, said, "What shall we call these things?" They were the walking dead. Their name was given accordingly, it fits. They stayed in slavery for 310 years, building up the country. They took their bare hands and joined the two oceans. Every cross tie on the railroad is the burnt out body of a so-called Negro. Question, why didn't the so-called Negro revolt, like hate? Answer, the Negro, so-called, were like a cub lion captured when still a baby and taught to do tricks. The so-called Negroes are likewise taught, for they, like the lion babies, do tricks and carry out biddings for the devil. They, like the lion, do not realize their great strength and that they are the stronger of the two. When they come into knowledge of self, they will start things rolling, for they have awakened to find even their brothers slack on the job. Question, what do you mean slack on the job? Answer, meaning they are teaching Allah's truth in an apologetic manner, which is wrong. Allah does not need anyone to feel ashamed to spread his teachings. If you are not man enough to teach it, then don't stand in the way, but step aside and make room for a man who is not afraid. When all the hard labor had been done and the country was in a position to go for self, then the problem came up of what to do with the slaves. They wanted to send them back to Africa. Abraham Lincoln is one who went so far as to send a shipload as a trial, but they died off so fast, he had to return them to the United States. During the Civil War, the leaders got their heads together and agreed the slaves were to be free, but only out of physical slavery into mental slavery, which is worse. The weapon prepared to do the job was a special weapon, fixed for this purpose alone, which is called the Holy Bible. The Bible is a book prepared under the guidance of King James. The book was fixed in 1611. The devils had it for 250 years before giving it to the so-called Negroes, who had it for only 90 years. The slaves were set free, off from the white district, and the smart so-called Negroes were given the Bible and taught how to read and ordained to enslave the minds of his people and keep them there. When they were so-called free, there was nowhere for them to go, nor did they have anything to call their own. Family life did not exist. So they started from nothing and worked up. In 1914, the devil's time was up, 6,000 years. And the sign that was to let them know their time was up would be, as Jesus said, dark clouds would cover the land, means troubles, famine, and earthquakes. In 1914, the whole European world became involved in war. There were wars and rumors of wars, plagues and famines, earthquakes, death, and destruction. In 1910, Allah, being a world traveler, came to these shores. He went to Africa and learned the language of the birds. He extracted the language of the people of Mars. He came to South America, Japan, India, Alaska, and other places a world traveler would. He could quote 150,000 years of history from memory, write 10 languages, and speak 16. As it was mentioned in We Seek a City, he had searched the entire universe looking for this heaven that the devil speaks of in Christianity. He came in 1930, July 4th, as mentioned in Ezekiel's first chapter. First verse. He came without observation, for he had said he would come for his people, and he stepped down off his throne and come into the bottomless pit, hell, for his people. Question: why didn't he send his servants to get us? Answer: because he told Abraham, your seed shall be taken into a land of strangers, a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them 400 years, and he that your seed shall serve, I shall judge. As it has been stated, Abraham, God asked Allah to allow him to live and go and bring them home. But Allah refused his request, because they were to be punished by none other than him. He is the Lord of all the worlds. Allah has said, even though they seem as endurable as the mountains, I shall bring them down to hell.
Chicken stay, don't go away. There's more to come. Yeah, the brother said they tricked us with the Holy Scriptures.
From this light, God created light upon earth. And man was given dominion over all things upon this earth, and the power to choose between good and evil. But each sought to do his own will, because he knew not the light of God's law. Man took dominion over man. The conquered were made to serve the conqueror. The weak were made to serve the strong. And freedom was gone from the world. So did the Egyptians.
Okay, now, in this modern world, all the 10 Commandments is broken. So the children of Israel, when they say the children of Israel, they also are talking about the black man. United States is Israel. Now you see that these are supposed to be the children of Israel, the Jews. This is what they are made to slave, is to build monuments. They got them pulling this monument or statue. Look how big it is. And they tell you right today that they are Semitic and they are Abraham, seeds of Abraham. But Jesus they wanted to kill Jesus. The Jews wanted to kill Jesus, right? They're telling everybody right now that they were slaves in Africa, what they call Africa, so-called Africa, or in Egypt, so-called Egypt. But for real, it was Kemet, you know. But they never never was a slave in Kemet. And Jesus was telling them that. He peeped it. Jesus say, you know, y'all lying. Let me tell you where it's at in the Bible. I'm gonna give it to you. St. John's 8:33. They answered him, talking about Jesus, say, we be of Abraham's seed and never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou ye shall be made free? They just got through telling you that they wasn't in bondage to any man. So Jesus, verse 39, St. John 8:39 says, Jesus saith unto him, if ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. He speaketh a lie. He speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the truth of the lie. So you know, they didn't like Jesus for telling them that. That's why they tried to kill Jesus, the Jews. And so they tried to alter the Bible to cover up all the lies that they told, but they can't cover the truth up. In the Bible, they couldn't cover all the truth up. You know, they always left some light uncovered. So they tried to code it up with words that they put together that they know you wouldn't understand unless you had the key or the seal to open the code. And so what they did was take Islam and mask it in Christianity. That word Christianity is a play on that word, Antichrist. The Antichrist is Christianity. That's that word, that's that play on words, and it's coded. Christianity is only 500 years old. Jesus never said he was a Christian. He never said he was a Jew. Moses never said he was a Jew or a Hebrew. They were Muslims, because that word Muslim means to do the will of God, to do the will of Allah. And all the prophets from Abraham, Moses, did the will of Allah. That's what Islam means. That's what that word, look it up in the dictionary. It said to do the will of God. Now, a sister wrote this book, Drusilla Dunjee Houston, called The Wonderful Ethiopian of the Ancient Kushite Empire. Those two words, Ethiopia and Kushite, Kush, it's in the Bible. But you don't see Africa in the Bible. But you see these two words. So now we're going to go to Brother Nipsey. Because that brother ancestry is from Ethiopia.
Prophetic, like, yeah, right, right, yeah, shortly before, too, just a year before the song, you know. Almost probably why they made that neutralized.
Wow. Now I want y'all to look at that brother. Look at his features. This is him right here, Nipsey Hussle. Look at his features. Now he looks a lot like Haile Selassie. Study it, because I'm gonna go and show you Haile Selassie. You're gonna learn a little bit about Ethiopia. 2000. They look similar. Their features are, the older he got, the more they look alike. That's Haile Selassie. His name before that was Rastafari. That's where the Rastafaris get their culture from.
The emperor, I think, kind of built in this appreciation of what was happening in the rest of the continent.
For many, many years, he could not trust anybody else. He himself was Minister of Education.
He was really a very special, God-gifted person.
The story of Ethiopia's great monarch.
Don't he look like
modernizer?
Yeah, he's a little shorter. Anyway.
And tragic hero Haile Selassie starts in the 1,000-year-old city of Harar.
We're just gonna give you a little glimpse of. We're not gonna do the whole thing. Not today.
It was here in Harar that Rastafari, as he was known before his coronation as emperor, cut his political teeth. It also serves as a strong symbol of the difference between the ancient but primitive feudal society he grew up in and the modern nation he wanted to build. As a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Harar cannot construct new buildings within the old city's walls. But new buildings do go up outside the old city, and technology creeps in from all directions.
So the community is calling you out, hopeful, no war, no problems.
Jeff Pierce is a Canadian author who has spent 10 years working on a book about the country's war with Italy. In his decade of research, he has interviewed some of the top experts on Ethiopian history.
Emperor Haile.
Now, we're going to cut it right there. I just wanted to show you the similarity of how Brother Nipsey, R.I.P., and Haile Selassie facial features. And Nipsey went to visit his people, when he was around a teenager or so. And Ethiopia was before Egypt. And the Garden of Eden is talking about Ethiopia, ancient Egypt or Kemet, Upper and Lower Kemet, the Arabian Peninsula, all of that was the Garden of Eden. And You could throw in India and China and Japan.
The army, which set off the present crisis with a mutiny that forced out the old prime minister.
These are the moments when Ethiopia's kingdom came to an end. In February 1974, the Ethiopian military rose up in revolt. By September, they deposed the Emperor Haile Selassie. It was a coup that brought to an end one of the world's oldest continuous kingdoms.
Gave it its first written constitution. Realizing that times must change, he has decreed constitutional reforms be made. Apparently with a view toward making Ethiopia a constitution.
Haile Selassie was the last emperor of a dynasty that claimed it could trace its roots back thousands of years.
And orderly.
The country is now a democratic republic, but Ethiopians haven't forgotten their kingdom's proud past. In the capital, Addis Ababa, this statue of Emperor Menelik II celebrates Ethiopia's long tradition of independence. At a time when much of Africa was being colonized by European powers, Menelik II's army fought off an Italian attempt at conquest. Ever since that famous victory, Ethiopia has been a beacon of self-determination for black people around the world.
But I'm here to get back beyond that, to the ancient history. I've got here the Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings, the story that tells you of all of those kings, those ancient empires. And I want to get behind that and find out exactly what made this country.
The book I'm carrying is a modern translation of the most important text in Ethiopian history. The Kebra Nagast was written in the 13th century. It sets out the lineage of Ethiopia's emperors. It makes some grand claims. It says the dynasty began in 950 BC, and that the first emperor, Menelik I, was the son of illustrious parents, Solomon, king of Israel, and Queen Makeda, better known as the legendary Queen of Sheba.
The link to the Old Testament gave a legitimacy to the Ethiopian Empire. But is there any truth in it? Is there really a connection between Solomon and Sheba and the Ethiopians? That's what I want to find out.
I can't speak to an emperor, but I do have an audience with Ethiopia's most important spiritual leader, the head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. As with most ancient kingdoms, the Ethiopian emperors claimed their power came from God. Church and state were inextricably linked. So evidence of the origins of the church might throw some light on the history and origins of the Ethiopian kingdom.
Could you tell me something about the history or the origins of the Ethiopian church?
1,000 years before Christianity, Ethiopians have accepted officially the Old Testament order, and they have followed for 1,000 years. So we accepted Judaism, and then we accepted Christianity. Now it is 3,000 years old altogether.
According to the patriarch, Ethiopia's Judeo-Christian tradition does date from the beginning of the Ethiopian kingdom. He says that the faith and the emperors came together.
He didn't say that.
The foundation of this belief lies in the astonishing claim that the very basis of Judaism is actually here in Ethiopia.
Now, he didn't say nothing about Judaism or Christianity. Y'all heard him. He said, let's play it again. Listen to what he say. He said, they was in the Old Testament, the order, you know. He said they was in the order of the Old Testament. He didn't say nothing about Jews. He didn't say nothing about Christianity.
Could you tell me something about the history or the origins of the Ethiopian church?
1,000 years before Christianity, Ethiopians have accepted officially the Old Testament order.
You hear what he said? 1,000 years before Christianity, they accepted the old Christianity order. He didn't say nothing about Judaism. He said 1,000 years before Christianity. They didn't know nothing about Christianity.
And they have followed for 1,000 years. So we accepted Judaism, and then we accepted Christianity. Now it is 3,000 years old altogether.
According to the patriarch, Ethiopia's Judeo-Christian tradition does date from the beginning of the Ethiopian kingdom. He says that the faith and the emperors came together.
See how he twisted that word around?
The foundation of this belief lies in the astonishing claim that the very basis of Judaism is actually here in Ethiopia. He tells me that the Ark of the Covenant containing the Ten Commandments was brought here from Jerusalem by Menelik, the son of Solomon.
The Ark of the Covenant and the Solomonic descent comes together. The Ark of the Covenant is with us in Ethiopia.
Can that really be true? If the Ark is in Ethiopia, it would be powerful evidence of a link between Ethiopia's founding emperor and the people of the Old Testament. But there's a problem. The Ark is deemed so holy a relic that no one is allowed to see it. And there's no historical evidence that Menelik I was the son of Solomon and Sheba. Yet faith in this legend is still strong. I want to find out why it endures and discover whether it's true. I'm going to look for continuities that might appear over centuries in religious traditions, in language, and in Ethiopia's old buildings. I want to see if I can connect them to Solomon and to Sheba. My journey will take me from Addis to some of the most important historical sites in Ethiopia, going further and further into the past to see if I can reach the time of the Old Testament. My guide here is Habtamu Mama. We've come to one of Ethiopia's most important cities, and it's something of a surprise to me. So this is the old city?
Yeah, this is one of the 5 main gates of Harar.
The legend of Ethiopia's unbroken Judeo-Christian history isn't that straightforward. Harar is a Muslim city. It's like a warren. And it confounds my expectations in other ways too. Ethiopia's modern history has been blighted by drought and famine. But in places unaffected by shortages like Harar's market, trade is brisk.
These are Muslims. He said trade is brisk. We're going to cut it here, y'all. Sugar is sugar, salt is salt. If you didn't learn nothing, it ain't my fault. This is Brother Blacklight saying Assalamu alaikum.